Commander Vesh'taal had seen approximately 347 impossible things during his 20-year career with the Galactic Security Coalition. None of them, absolutely none, had prepared him for the smoking crater that used to be his office door, or the human standing in the wreckage holding a datapad like nothing had happened. "Morning, Commander," the human said cheerfully. "Your door was locked." Vesh'taal's 3 eyes blinked in sequence, a biological response his species had evolved to process extreme confusion. The human, this particular specimen, named Marcus Webb, stood 6.5 feet tall and possessed the unsettling habit of smiling at entirely inappropriate moments. Like now, while surrounded by the burning remains of a reinforced titanium barrier that had cost more than Vesh'taal's annual salary. "Webb," Vesh'taal said slowly, his translator struggling with the mix of exasperation and exhaustion in his voice. "That door was rated to withstand a direct hit from a plasma cannon." "Yeah?" Webb scratched his head, looking genuinely puzzled. Must have been defective. Anyway, we've got a problem." Of course they did. Problems seem to orbit humans like moons around a gas giant, inevitable and numerous. Vesh'taal gestured with 2 of his forearms toward the chairs in his office, trying desperately to maintain some semblance of authority despite the fact that his door was currently decorating the hallway in several thousand pieces. "Please enlighten me," Vesh'taal said, settling into his chair with a wheeze that his species made when confronting bureaucratic nightmares. "What fresh catastrophe has befallen Station Zenith this morning?" Webb dropped into the chair across from him, which groaned ominously under his weight. Humans were dense, absurdly so, their bones and muscles packed with enough mass to make them walking battering rams. Evolution on a death world did that, apparently. "The Kethri cubs are missing," Webb announced. Vesh'taal felt his primary heart skip exactly 3 beats. The Kethri were the galaxy's apex predators, 7-foot-tall felines with reflexes that made assassins weep and claws that could shred combat armor like tissue paper. They'd been at peace with the Coalition for barely 2 cycles, a fragile treaty that rested on the thinnest foundation of mutual respect and careful diplomacy. And their younglings, 3 cubs belonging to Ambassador Threx'kaa, were currently somewhere on the station. "Missing." "Define missing," Vesh'taal said, his voice climbing into registers that would have made his ancestors proud. "As in temporarily misplaced? Hiding in the ventilation shafts again? Or missing as in we are all about to die horrible diplomatic deaths?" "Third option," Webb said helpfully. "Maybe fourth. Hard to say." Vesh'taal's translator made a sound like choking, which was appropriate because he felt like choking. "Explain, now, using small words and complete sentences, because my cardiovascular systems cannot handle your species' particular brand of casual apocalypse today." Webb leaned forward, his expression shifting into something that almost resembled seriousness. "Almost." "Ambassador Threx'kaa reported the cubs missing about 40 minutes ago. They were supposed to be in the diplomatic quarter, supervised by their handlers. Last anyone saw them, they were heading towards Sector 7. "Sector 7. Vesh'taal repeated flatly. "The industrial sector, where we keep the heavy machinery, the waste processors, and approximately 15,000 ways for curious younglings to get themselves killed." 16,000. "Actually, we added a new plasma incinerator last week." Vesh'taal stood so quickly, his chair toppled backward. "Assemble every available security team, contact Ambassador Threx'kaa, and assure her that we are deploying maximum resources. Seal Sector 7 and begin a level-by-level search immediately." "Already done," Webb said, not moving from his seat. "Sent the orders before I came to see you. Figured you'd want that." Vesh'taal paused midway through his panic spiral. "You already initiated emergency protocols?" "Yeah, seemed like the obvious play. Which is why we need to talk about the weird part." "The weird part?" "Because missing predator cubs weren't weird enough." Vesh'taal slowly righted his chair and sat back down, feeling every one of his 63 years pressing down on his carapace. "Continue," he said weakly. Webb pulled up a holographic display from his datapad. Security footage flickered to life, showing one of the main corridors in Sector 7. Timestamp indicated 28 minutes ago. The image quality was poor, the lighting worse, but Vesh'taal could make out movement in the shadows. Then he saw them. 3 Kethri cubs, each roughly the size of a full-grown wolf from Earth, padding down the corridor with that peculiar grace their species possessed. They moved in formation, heads swiveling, clearly searching for something, or someone. "Okay," Vesh'taal said, his breathing steadying slightly. "They appear healthy, unharmed. We can track them from this footage." "Wait for it," Webb interrupted. The cubs stopped suddenly, all 3 going rigid. Their ears, those expressive triangular indicators of mood and intent, perked straight up. Then, in perfect synchronization, they bolted towards something off-camera, moving faster than the station's sensors could properly track. The footage cut to another angle. This one showed a maintenance junction, pipes and conduits creating a maze of metal. The cubs emerged from 3 different directions, converging on a single point with predatory precision that made Vesh'taal's survival instincts scream warnings. And there, standing in the center of their triangulated attack pattern, was another human. She stood maybe 5'6", considerably shorter than Webb, with dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. She wore standard maintenance coveralls, grease-stained and well-worn, and carried a toolbox that looked heavy enough to require anti-gravity assistance. She did not appear to be using anti-gravity assistance. The cubs hit her simultaneously from 3 angles, 75 pounds of apex predator muscle and claw launching through the air in a coordinated strike that would have killed most species instantly. Vesh'taal watched in horror as the woman looked up, registered the incoming missiles of fur and death, and casually dropped her toolbox. Her hands moved in a blur, snatching 2 cubs out of the air, by their scruffs with the kind of reflexes that shouldn't have been possible. The 3rd cub she caught with her foot, hooking it gently and redirecting its momentum so it tumbled harmlessly to the ground. "By the ancestors," Vesh'taal whispered. The woman set the cubs down carefully, said something the audio pickup couldn't catch, and scratched each of them behind the ears. The cubs, these apex predators who could disembowel a combat drone without breaking stride, purred loud enough for the sensors to register, actually, purr. Then the woman did something that made Vesh'taal's translator emit a sound like dying machinery. She bent down, scooped up one of the cubs, and draped it across her shoulders like a particularly dangerous scarf. The cub settled into place immediately, wrapping itself around her neck with its head resting on top of hers. The other 2 cubs took up positions flanking her, matching her pace as she picked up her toolbox and continued down the corridor. "That," Webb said, freezing the image on the woman's face, which showed an expression of mild amusement rather than appropriate terror, "is Lieutenant Emma Reeves. Maintenance Division, specializes in critical systems repair." "She's wearing a Kethri cub," Vesh'taal said, his voice climbing into registers that his species typically reserved for mating calls or extreme distress. Both seemed appropriate right now. As a fashion accessory, technically the cub is wearing her, but yeah, that's the situation. Vesh'taal stood again, paced to the hole where his door used to be, paced back. This is, without question, the worst possible scenario. Ambassador Threx'kaa is going to think we kidnapped her offspring. We'll have an interstellar incident. War. Probable extinction of multiple species. All because your colleague decided to adopt predator cubs like their pets. In fairness, Webb said, pulling up another display, the cubs seem really into it. The new footage showed Lieutenant Reeves in a different section of Sector 7, this time working on a malfunctioning power relay. The cub around her shoulders had shifted position, now lying across her back like a breathing, purring backpack. The other 2 cubs sat nearby watching her work with a kind of focused attention that suggested either deep fascination or elaborate planning for future murder. With Kethri, those options weren't mutually exclusive. Reeves said something, pointing at a cluster of wires. One of the cubs leaned forward, sniffing the indicated spot, then made a chirping noise. Reeves laughed, reached into the junction box, and pulled out a family of small maintenance drones that had apparently nested in the circuitry. "She's using them as work partners," Vesh'taal said faintly. "Seems like it," Webb agreed, "and they're pretty good at it actually. Watch this next part. The footage jumped forward. Now Reeves was in the environmental processing section, a maze of pipes and filters that regulated atmosphere for the entire station. She'd set her cub scarf down on a nearby platform and was pointing at something in the upper reaches of the facility. All three cubs looked where she indicated, then without any apparent signal, launched themselves upward with the kind of acrobatic precision that made Vesh'taal dizzy just watching. They climbed through the infrastructure like they'd been born to it, reaching a section that would have required Vesh'taal to file for proper scaffolding permits and safety equipment. One of the cubs braced itself against a pipe, providing leverage while another stretched out to reach something lodged in a filter assembly. The third cub coordinated from a different angle, its sharp eyes scanning for additional problems. Reeves watched from below, occasionally calling out what sounded like encouragement or instructions. When the cubs descended successfully, carrying some kind of debris that had been jamming the filtration system, she produced treats from one of her coverall pockets and distributed them fairly. She brought snacks, Vesh'taal said numbly. She brought snacks for the ambassador's children while conducting unauthorized maintenance in a restricted sector. Technically, she had authorization for the maintenance, Webb said. The cub-sitting part is new, though. Vesh'taal's communicator chirped urgently. He answered without checking the identifier, which was a mistake because Ambassador Threx'kaa's face filled the holographic display immediately. The Kethri ambassador looked exactly how Vesh'taal expected someone whose children had gone missing to look, which was to say ready to commit extreme violence. Commander Vesh'taal, Ambassador Threx'kaa said, her voice carrying the kind of controlled fury that preceded genocides. I trust you have located my offspring. Yes, Vesh'taal said, probably too loudly. Yes, Ambassador, they are safe, completely safe. We have visual confirmation and are moving to secure them now. Where? The single word carried enough threat to make Vesh'taal's survival instinct suggest immediate evacuation to a different galaxy. Vesh'taal looked at Webb, who shrugged helplessly. There was no good way to explain this. No diplomatic phrasing that would make the situation sound reasonable. He pulled up the latest footage and transmitted it to the ambassador's display. Ambassador Threx'kaa watched in silence. The silence stretched, becoming heavier with each passing second. Vesh'taal could hear his own cardiovascular systems working overtime, could feel his career dissolving in real time. Finally, the ambassador spoke. Is that, she said slowly, Lieutenant Reeves from maintenance? Vesh'taal blinked all three eyes in sequence again. You know her. She repaired the environmental controls in my quarters last week. Very efficient, professional. Ambassador Threx'kaa tilted her head, studying the footage where her cubs were currently climbing on Reeves like she was interesting terrain. My younglings appear content. They appear content, Vesh'taal repeated, because his brain had apparently decided to stop processing complex thoughts. Yes, Kethri cubs are excellent judges of character. If they trust her, she has proven herself worthy of that trust. The ambassador paused. However, they were supposed to remain in supervised quarters. How did they reach Sector 7? Webb coughed. About that. We reviewed the security logs. Turns out they, and I'm quoting the technical report here, pulled a heist. Vesh'taal turned to stare at Webb. Pulled a what? A heist, Webb repeated, pulling up yet another set of footage. Watch. They synchronized their movements to avoid patrol patterns, used ventilation shafts we didn't even know were accessible, and managed to bypass 3 separate security checkpoints by timing their movements to maintenance cycles. The footage showed exactly that. 3 cubs, moving with the kind of calculated precision that suggested either supernatural intelligence or really good planning, making their way through the station's most secure areas, like they'd studied the layout for weeks. They're 8 months old, Ambassador Threx'kaa said, sounding proud rather than concerned. Very advanced for their age. Takes after their mother, obviously. Obviously, Vesh'taal echoed weakly. And they did all this to reach Lieutenant Reeves specifically. Appears so. They're quite taken with her. She has the proper alpha presence. Firm but kind. Knows how to establish boundaries. The ambassador watched as Reeves gently repositioned a cub that was trying to chew on a power cable. Yes, very appropriate discipline. Excellent instincts. Vesh'taal felt his understanding of reality crack slightly. So you're not concerned that a human has essentially adopted your children as work assistants? Concerned? No. Impressed? Yes. It takes considerable skill to earn a Kethri cub's respect. Most species can't manage it. Ambassador Threx'kaa's expression shifted into something that might have been amusement. Tell me, Commander, has Lieutenant Reeves been offered any commendations recently? I'll check her file immediately, Vesh'taal said, because agreeing seemed safer than questioning the surreal turn this conversation had taken. Good. In the meantime, I'll collect my offspring personally. Where is Lieutenant Reeves currently working? Webb consulted his datapad. Reactor maintenance on level 42. She's scheduled to be there for another 3 hours, unless the Cubs help speed things up. They probably will, Ambassador Threx'kaa said. My younglings are very motivated when they enjoy the company. I'll meet her there. Vesh'taal, Webb. Thank you for your swift response, and for not, as I believe the human saying goes, freaking out completely. The communication ended, leaving Vesh'taal standing in his destroyed office, staring at the space where the ambassador's hologram had been. Did that just happen? He asked Webb. Yep. And we're not about to have an interstellar incident? Nope. And I need to somehow explain to station administration why a maintenance technician has better diplomatic relations with the Kethri than our entire diplomatic corps. Probably. Yeah. Vesh'taal sat down heavily, his chair groaning under the weight of his existential exhaustion. Humans, he muttered. Why is it always humans? Webb stood, stretching to his full height. Want me to get you a new door? Get me a bottle of Ventari sedative spirits first. A big one. Will do, Commander. Webb paused at the doorway, or rather the space where the doorway used to exist. For what it's worth, Emma's good people. Probably the best maintenance tech on the station. Cubs have good taste. He left, leaving Vesh'taal alone with his thoughts and the growing certainty that he should have chosen a different career path. Maybe farming on a nice quiet agricultural world, where the most exciting thing that happened was crop rotation. His communicator chirped again. This time it was station administration. Commander Vesh'taal, we're receiving reports of unauthorized personnel conducting reactor maintenance in Sector 7, with unknown entities assisting. Please advise. Vesh'taal looked at the ceiling, wondering if the ancestors were laughing at him from whatever afterlife his species believed in. The unknown entities are Ambassador Threx'kaa's Cubs. The unauthorized personnel is our best maintenance tech. Everything is fine. Somehow, Vesh'taal confirmed. Welcome to working with humans. File this under unexplainable but functionally acceptable, and move on with your day. He ended the call, pulled up Lieutenant Emma Reeves' personnel file, and began reading. 27 commendations for exceptional service. Specialty certifications in systems most engineers wouldn't touch without hazard pay. And buried in her personal notes section, a single line that made Vesh'taal laugh despite everything. Prefers working alone but tolerates competent assistance regardless of species. Tolerates. The woman who was currently wearing an apex predator like a scarf and treating 2 more as apprentice technicians preferred working alone, but tolerated assistance. Humans, absolutely terrifying, completely unpredictable, and somehow exactly what the galaxy needed without realizing it. Vesh'taal added a note to her file recommending promotion and hazard bonus pay, then leaned back in his chair and waited for Webb to return with that sedative. He was definitely going to need it. Outside his office, or rather, outside the gaping hole where his office entrance used to be, Station Zenith continued its normal operations. Somewhere on level 42, a human woman was teaching Apex Predator Cubs the finer points of reactor maintenance. Somewhere in diplomatic quarters, an ambassador was probably writing the galaxy's strangest commendation letter. And somewhere in the universe, Vesh'taal suspected, the ancestors were definitely laughing. 3 hours later, Vesh'taal found himself doing something he'd sworn never to do again after the incident with the exploding cargo bay. He was voluntarily heading toward a potential disaster zone, accompanied by Webb, who whistled something tuneless and human while they descended toward level 42. You seem remarkably calm, Vesh'taal observed, gripping the elevator rail with two of his 4 hands. The other 2 held his datapad and what remained of his dignity respectively. "Why wouldn't I be?" Webb asked, still whistling between words. "Emma's got everything under control. She has 3 juvenile apex predators helping her perform maintenance on the station's primary reactor. The reactor that keeps us alive. The reactor that, if mishandled, could vaporize this entire sector." "Yeah, but Emma's really good at her job." Vesh'taal made the wheezing sound again. His species had evolved it specifically for moments when words failed to capture the appropriate level of stress. The elevator descended through 42 levels of station infrastructure, each one representing another opportunity for catastrophic failure that Vesh'taal's imagination helpfully provided in vivid detail. The doors opened to reveal level 42's main corridor, which looked surprisingly normal. No explosions, no screaming, no diplomatic incidents manifesting in physical form, just standard industrial lighting, the hum of machinery and the faint sound of something purring loud enough to vibrate through the deck plating. "That's a good sign, right?" Vesh'taal asked hopefully. "Probably means the Cubs are happy," Webb agreed, leading the way toward the reactor maintenance section. They rounded a corner and nearly collided with 2 junior technicians, both Salkari, a species known for their 6 manipulator limbs and extreme caution around anything more dangerous than a light switch. Both technicians looked like they'd witnessed something that fundamentally challenged their understanding of physics and common sense. "Commander," one of them said, their translator crackling with distress. "You need to see this." "Is anyone injured?" Vesh'taal demanded. "No, sir. That's part of what you need to see." They entered the reactor chamber through the observation deck, a reinforced viewing area that lets supervisors monitor critical work without actually entering the hazard zone. Vesh'taal pressed against the transparent aluminum window and felt his brain struggle to process what he was witnessing. Lieutenant Emma Reeves stood inside the primary reactor housing, surrounded by enough exposed energy conduits to power a small moon. She wore standard protective gear, her movements careful and deliberate as she worked on a junction box that looked like it had been designed by someone who hated maintenance technicians personally. One Kethri cub perched on her shoulders, exactly as the footage had shown, its tail wrapped loosely around her neck for balance. But now, instead of just watching, the cub held a small diagnostic scanner in its mouth, positioning it wherever Reeves indicated with casual gestures. The other 2 cubs occupied positions that made Vesh'taal's engineering background scream in protest. One balanced on a narrow catwalk 3 meters above Reeves, its sharp eyes scanning the upper conduits. The third had somehow wedged itself into a maintenance crawl space that was supposed to be inaccessible, its claws gripping exposed structural supports that definitely weren't rated for Kethri weight. "She's using them as a full maintenance team," Vesh'taal said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Those positions require safety certifications and specialized training." "Cubs are natural climbers," Webb said, sounding proud for some reason, "and they've got better reflexes than any safety harness. Watch what happens next." Reeves said something, pointing at a section of conduit near the ceiling. The cub above her immediately moved, flowing across the catwalk like liquid muscle. It reached the indicated spot, extended one paw, and gently tapped a specific junction point. A panel popped open, revealing a tangle of wiring that made Vesh'taal's eyes hurt to look at. "That panel was stuck," one of the Salkari technicians said quietly. "We've been trying to access it for 3 days. Filed 6 different maintenance requests. That cub opened it in 4 seconds." The cub on Reeves's shoulders made a chirping sound. Reeves glanced at the diagnostic scanner it held, nodded, and pulled a specialized tool from her belt. She made 3 precise adjustments to the junction box, then stepped back and made a gesture. All 3 cubs immediately retreated to safer positions, the one in the crawl space extracting itself with the kind of flexibility that shouldn't have been anatomically possible. Reeves activated something on her control panel. The reactor housing hummed, vibrated, and settled into a new harmonic frequency that sounded noticeably smoother than before. "She fixed it," the other Salkari technician said, sounding amazed. "That harmonic imbalance has been driving us crazy for weeks. We couldn't even diagnose the source, let alone repair it." Reeves produced treats from her pocket and distributed them to the cubs, who accepted them with the kind of dignified gratitude that suggested they knew exactly how valuable their contribution had been. Then she scratched each cub behind the ears, said something that made all three purr loudly enough to register on Vesh'taal's communicator, and began packing up her tools. "I should go down there," Vesh'taal said, though his survival instinct strongly disagreed with this assessment. "Officially verify everything is safe, confirm the cubs are unharmed." "Want backup?" Webb asked. "Yes. Absolutely yes. If I'm about to die in a bizarre maintenance accident involving apex predators, I want witnesses." They made their way down to the reactor floor, passing through 3 separate safety doors that all helpfully reminded them they were entering a hazard zone where death was not just possible, but statistically likely. Reeves looked up as they approached, her expression shifting from focused concentration to polite confusion. "Commander Vesh'taal," she said, sounding surprised. "Webb, didn't expect supervision on this job. Something wrong?" The 3 cubs immediately positioned themselves between Reeves and the newcomers, not aggressively, but with the kind of protective alertness that suggested they'd identified potential threats and were prepared to address them with extreme prejudice. "Easy, guys," Reeves said calmly. "They're friends." Probably, Vesh'taal squeaked. "Well, you did blow up your own door this morning," Reeves pointed out to Webb. "Makes people nervous." Webb shrugged. "Fair point." One of the cubs, the one that had been riding on Reeves' shoulders, padded forward to sniff Vesh'taal carefully. Its nose twitched, processing scents that Vesh'taal's species couldn't begin to detect. After a moment that felt like several years, the cub made a satisfied chirping sound and headbutted Vesh'taal's leg with enough force to make him stagger. "That means he likes you," Reeves said. "Congratulations, you've been approved." "Approved for what?" Vesh'taal asked, regaining his balance with difficulty. "Existence, mostly. Kethri cubs are picky about who they tolerate in their space." She gestured at the reactor housing. "Anyway, harmonic imbalance is corrected. Efficiency is up by 12%, and I found 3 separate maintenance issues that weren't on the work order, but definitely needed addressing. Should hold steady for the next 6 months, minimum." Vesh'taal pulled up his datapad, confirming the reactor's new performance metrics. Everything Reeves claimed was accurate, verified by multiple independent sensors. "This is remarkable work, Lieutenant, especially considering you completed it in 3 hours when the original estimate was 2 full shifts." "Had good help," Reeves said, reaching down to scratch the nearest cub. "These guys are naturals. Better spatial awareness than most trained technicians, incredible physical coordination, and they actually listen to instructions." "Unlike some humans," Webb muttered. "Unlike some humans," Reeves agreed cheerfully. "Speaking of which, I should probably return them to their mother before she thinks I've kidnapped her kids." "About that," Vesh'taal said carefully, "Ambassador Threx'kaa is aware of the situation. She's actually on her way here now to collect them personally." Reeves blinked. "Oh, is she upset? Because I swear this wasn't planned. They just sort of showed up while I was working on the environmental processes, and they seemed really interested in what I was doing, and it would have been rude to tell them to leave when they were being so helpful." "She's not upset," Vesh'taal assured her, though part of him still couldn't quite believe that statement. In fact, she seemed impressed. Apparently, earning a Kethri cub's trust is considered a significant achievement. Reeves looked down at the 3 cubs, who had arranged themselves around her in a loose protective formation. "They're good kids. Smart, focused, excellent problem-solving skills. Could probably get certified as maintenance assistants if the regulations allowed for it." Vesh'taal opened his mouth to explain the numerous legal, ethical and practical problems with certifying juvenile apex predators as station maintenance crew, but the elevator doors opened before he could begin. Ambassador Threx'kaa emerged, flanked by 2 Kethri guards who looked like they could punch through bulkheads without much effort. The cubs' ears perked up immediately. They chirped in unison, a sound of pure joy, and bounded toward their mother with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested they'd been having the best day of their young lives. Ambassador Threx'kaa caught all 3 in a complicated embrace that involved a lot of purring and what Vesh'taal assumed were affectionate headbutts. "There you are, my little troublemakers," the ambassador said, her tone mixing exasperation with obvious love. Escaping secure quarters, infiltrating restricted sectors, participating in unauthorized reactor maintenance. I'm very disappointed. The cubs looked appropriately ashamed for approximately 3 seconds before the largest one chirped proudly and pointed at Reeves with one paw. Yes, I can see you made a friend, Ambassador Threx'kaa said. She approached Reeves, who stood her ground with the kind of calm that suggested either extreme courage or complete obliviousness to danger. Vesh'taal suspected it was probably both. Lieutenant Reeves, we meet again. Ambassador, Reeves said, nodding respectfully. Sorry about the cubs. They're really talented though. Helped me fix a harmonic imbalance that's been driving engineering crazy. Did they? The ambassador studied the reactor housing, then her offspring, then Reeves. Tell me, Lieutenant, do you have experience working with Kethri? No, ma'am. First time. But they're good learners, and they seem to understand basic safety protocols. Plus they're way better at reaching tight spaces than anyone with proper safety gear. Ambassador Threx'kaa made a sound that Vesh'taal's translator interpreted as laughter. Most species are terrified of my people, Lieutenant. Yet you treated my cubs as colleagues, rather than threats. Why? Reeves shrugged. They approached me with curiosity instead of aggression. Seemed interested in the work, not in causing problems. And honestly, I've worked with plenty of species who are way more dangerous than some cubs who just want to learn stuff. Humans, Webb said helpfully, are terrifying. Also true, Reeves agreed. Ambassador Threx'kaa studied Reeves for a long moment, then reached out and placed one massive paw on the human's shoulder. It was a gesture that in Kethri culture signified deep respect and acceptance. You have the soul of a pack leader, Lieutenant Emma Reeves. My cubs recognized this immediately, as did I when you repaired my quarters. I would be honored if you would consider joining me for a meal sometime. We could discuss proper training protocols for younglings interested in technical fields. I'd like that, Reeves said, looking genuinely pleased. And if the cubs ever want to shadow me on maintenance calls, they're welcome, assuming that's okay with station regulations. All eyes turned to Vesh'taal, who suddenly felt the weight of several impossible decisions pressing down on his carapace. On one hand, allowing juvenile apex predators to participate in critical maintenance work violated approximately 17 different safety protocols. On the other hand, they just completed in 3 hours what should have taken 2 full shifts, and refusing the ambassador's implicit request seemed like a spectacularly bad diplomatic move. I'll need to review the regulations, Vesh'taal said slowly. Perhaps we could establish a trial program, supervised educational experiences in controlled environments, with extensive documentation and appropriate safety measures. Bureaucracy, Webb said. Love it. It's how we prevent disasters, Vesh'taal replied. Most of the time. Ambassador Threx'kaa's expression suggested she found this amusing. Very well, Commander. Draft your proposal and submit it to my office. I'm certain we can find mutually acceptable terms. She gestured to her cubs. Come, younglings. Time to return home. You can visit Lieutenant Reeves another day. The cubs made disappointed sounds but obeyed immediately, falling into formation around their mother. The largest one paused to headbutt Reeves's leg one more time, then scampered after its siblings. The Kethri entourage disappeared into the elevator, leaving behind a silence that felt almost oppressive after all the purring. Well, Reeves said eventually. That was weird. That's one word for it, Vesh'taal agreed. Lieutenant, I'm adding a formal commendation to your file. Exceptional work under unusual circumstances. Also, expect a significant bonus in your next pay cycle, and possibly a promotion if I can convince administration that befriending apex predators counts as diplomatic service. Appreciate it, Commander. Reeves started gathering her tools. Anything else you need? I've got a clogged waste processor on level 15 that's probably not going to fix itself. No, you're dismissed. And Lieutenant, thank you for not causing an interstellar incident. Wasn't planning on it, Reeves said cheerfully, but you're welcome. She left, carrying her toolbox like it weighed nothing, leaving Vesh'taal and Webb alone in the reactor chamber. She's terrifying, Vesh'taal said. Yep, but also possibly the best thing that's happened to station operations in years. Also, yep. Vesh'taal pulled up his datapad and began drafting the most ridiculous proposal he'd ever written. Educational exchange program, allowing juvenile Kethri to participate in supervised maintenance activities under the guidance of qualified human personnel. He'd have to include safety protocols, liability waivers, cultural sensitivity training, and probably a dozen other things that would make administration question his sanity. But the Cubs had been happy. Ambassador Threx'kaa had been pleased. The reactor was running better than it had in months. And sometimes Vesh'taal reflected, the galaxy worked in strange ways that defied conventional wisdom and proper bureaucratic procedure. His communicator chirped. Station administration again. Commander Vesh'taal, we're receiving a formal request from Ambassador Threx'kaa for an educational partnership program involving her offspring and a human maintenance technician. Please explain. Vesh'taal looked at Webb, who grinned in that unsettling human way that suggested he found chaos deeply entertaining. File it under unexplainable but functionally acceptable, Vesh'taal said tiredly. And schedule a meeting with administration. This is going to require extensive discussion. Is this related to the apex predators that were spotted in the reactor chamber earlier? Directly related, yes. And the human who was using them as maintenance assistants? That would be Lieutenant Reeves, yes. There was a long pause. Commander, are you feeling well? Do you need medical assistance? I need a vacation, Vesh'taal said. But I'll settle for that bottle of sedative spirits and an update to our safety regulations that somehow accounts for friendly apex predators. Can you arrange that? I'll try, sir. The communication ended. Vesh'taal and Webb headed back toward the elevator, leaving behind the reactor chamber, with its improved efficiency and lingering scent of Kethri cubs, who'd learned that maintenance work could be fun. You know, Webb said as they ascended, this might actually work out. The cubs get educational enrichment, Emma gets reliable assistance, and the ambassador gets peace of mind knowing her kids are learning valuable skills. Or it's a disaster waiting to happen that will somehow be blamed on me. Vesh'taal countered. Could be both. That's the fun of working with humans. Vesh'taal wheezed again. Fun. Yes, that's definitely the word I would use. They emerged on the command level to find Vesh'taal's office still missing its door. A maintenance request had been filed, priority level low, estimated completion time 3 to 5 business days. Vesh'taal added a note requesting Lieutenant Reeves specifically, because if anyone could fix a door quickly and efficiently, it was the human who'd befriended apex predators before lunch. His datapad chirped with an incoming message from Ambassador Threx'kaa. He opened it with trepidation, expecting additional complications or formal diplomatic correspondence that would require hours of careful response. Instead, he found a single image. 3 Kethri cubs, curled up together in what appeared to be the ambassador's personal quarters, fast asleep after their adventure, and tucked among them, like it belonged there, was a standard station maintenance manual that someone had clearly been reading to them. Below the image, a simple message in perfect coalition standard. Thank you for allowing my cubs to learn today. They speak very highly of humans. Perhaps your species is exactly what the galaxy needed after all. Vesh'taal stared at the message for a long time, then filed it carefully in his personal archive under reasons why this job doesn't completely destroy my soul. The file was smaller than he'd like, but growing. Commander? Webb called from the doorway that wasn't there. That sedative you wanted? Administration sent over a whole case. They said you'd probably need it. They were correct, Vesh'taal said. They were absolutely correct. He opened the first bottle, poured a generous measure, and raised it in a silent toast to Lieutenant Emma Reeves, apex predator cubs, and the beautiful chaos that humanity brought to the galaxy, whether anyone asked for it or not. Outside Station Zenith, stars wheeled through the void in their eternal dance. Inside, a human maintenance technician fixed a waste processor on level 15 while 3 juvenile apex predators slept peacefully and dreamed of junction boxes. And somewhere between those extremes the galaxy continued turning, slightly better than it had been that morning, which Vesh'taal decided, sipping his sedative, was probably the best anyone could hope for when humans were involved.